So welcome back to this third day of the Ideathon, and this is the third segment of our workshop. So I just want to mention that since the beginning of this Ideathon, we've been talking about various technologies and what are the decentralized methods of practicing technique in creating some technologies that will enable us in moving humanity forward. So but like one of the most ignored aspects in decentralization is the human aspect. So we have Kamal Thacker over here. So he's from the Krishnamurti Foundation in Kolkata. So he'll be talking about the similarities uh, between the principles of the world teacher Jiddu Krishnamurti and uh, decentralization. So we will be looking into the insights of Krishnamurti and how it relates to the principles of decentralization. So it is a human approach towards how technology is built, and also we are going to see why technique can be more important than the technologies, because it's human technique that creates technology. It's not the other way around. So without further ado, I would like to give the stage to Kamal sir. Yeah.
From
Yeah.
there?
Yeah. Yes. You can sit and
Yeah. Okay. Just take out these
yeah,
papers.
sure.
Let's make sure. I was telling, friends, about the Krishnamurti Foundation and about J. Krishnamurti. And it's something that, it takes a little time to go into depth because as you'll discover, I mean, I came in touch with his work when I was working in the British Council. And that's the time that's about 25 years ago. The first time when I came in touch, it just did not make sense. And, later on, when I sort of stepped out of my work environment and then I started looking at it afresh, everything seemed different. I mean, it all started to make sense. I was wondering why it happened. But what was the reason that initially you reject something because perhaps it's something that you don't want to go into, you don't want to listen to, maybe because it contravenes something that you have in mind, your own beliefs, etc., etc. But when you are a little free and there is space to receive something exactly as it is, without any filter, no filter, then I think, then it becomes a very different situation. So that's how, when I left my previous organization, then I came in touch with the Krishnamurti Foundation. But later on, we'll talk, we'll have more opportunity to talk about the institution, about Krishnamurti's life, etc. But since today the focus is on the core work of Krishnamurti. And so what I thought I will do is in my own mind, because it's very difficult for newcomers to grasp something, which is a bit very subtle. At the same time, not so subtle. If one is open to it, it's not so subtle also. So I thought I will just perhaps, when I sum up a point, then I'll probably do a short reading that I've brought with me. And then just there are only 4 or 5 pillars, so to speak, that I would say that they are critical in Krishnamurti's insights. So the first one, I just want to say this, though I will narrate an incident which happened with an Italian physicist. I think he was Italian, Fritjof Capra. And what happened was that he was listening to one of the talks of Krishnamurti somewhere in Italy or something, if I'm not mistaken. And then he could not understand what Krishnamurti was saying, because Krishnamurti was saying that you need to go beyond thought. And he was saying, I am a scientist. How can I put this in practice? Going beyond thought. So then what happened? The next day, he happened to get some time to speak to Krishnamurti. And then he actually said something. So I'll just read out that episode. It'll take only 5 minutes. And maybe then I will sum up, what he exactly had in mind actually. So this is the story, and maybe from there You will pick up something and then we'll talk about what it was. Fritjof Capra, he became famous for his bestseller book Tao of Physics, published in 1975. It was one of the first books that tried to show the connection between modern physics and Eastern mysticism. So he was also trying very hard to relate science and inquiry. Who influenced Capra on his journey as a particle physicist? What kind of conversations did he have with several remarkable people? That is the focus of that book that he wrote called Uncommon Wisdom, Conversations with Remarkable People. Capra recalls his discussions with one of those remarkable people. It was Jiddu Krishnamurti, whom he met in 1968. When Capra met Krishnamurti, he was on the runway of his career as a physicist, and it was about to take off. Krishnamurti was giving a series of talks at the University of California, where Capra was a faculty. Capra recalls, I remember that I was fascinated as well as deeply disturbed by Krishnamurti's talks. After each evening's talk, Jacqueline and I stayed up for several hours, sitting at our fireplace and discussing what Krishnamurti had said. Jacqueline was his wife. Krishnamurti had created a major confusion in Capra's mind. He didn't know how to marry his career ambition with the advice of going beyond thought. Fortunately, he got an opportunity to meet Krishnamurti the morning after one of his talks. How can I be a scientist, Capra said, and still follow your advice of stopping thought and attaining freedom from the known? Krishnamurti answered immediately. First, you are a human being, he said, then you are a scientist. First, you have to become free, and this freedom cannot be achieved through thought. It is achieved through meditation, that word he explained later, the understanding of the totality of life in which every form of fragmentation has ceased, no division whatsoever. Krishnamurti told Capra that once you have this understanding, you will be able to work as a scientist without any problems. Capra remembers. Krishnamurti answered my question in 10 seconds in a way that completely solved my problem. In so many ways, Krishnamurti's message that first you are a human being is the essence of his teaching. Implied in that is the need to be free of conditioning, division, and fragmentation. To understand the totality of life, you are humanity, he would often say in his talks. Does not what Krishnamurti told Capra apply to each one of us, regardless of our field of activity? So that was basically the article I wanted to read out. And I said, I just selected a few pillars of that. And the first pillar, I think this is very important because for the moment, we must put the theme of decentralization or centralization, etc., behind for the moment. Because what he says, the fundamental understanding of what it is to be a human being without division comes first. So, you will find that very often people who are very skilled scientists, but they are very ambitious or greedy, or sometimes you will find that people have that, but because they are so greedy or because they have a certain bent, they will do anything to use their scientific skill. So what he wanted to communicate was that if you actually get to come to grips with that totality of your existence as a human being, then all the divisions that you yourself have built up, I am a Hindu or a Christian or a Muslim or this or that, hundreds of divisions that we build up. If those layers, he calls all that conditioning. So many things that are built up in ourselves which disturb the process of seeing. सो इट डज नॉट, आप तो हिंदी बोलते हैं, तो वो देखने की जो ये है ना, वो उसको बंद कर देते हैं. इट डिसरप्ट्स द क्वालिटी ऑफ सीइंग बिकॉज यू सी ओनली व्हाट यू वांट टू सी. So that I stress that because in the context of our discussion, it's important just for the moment. And obviously, when we look at issues which are decentralization and all that, but the fundamental issue, before you can see with clarity, that comes with addressing some of these fundamental issues. Then we'll actually discuss when there are interactions on the issue. We'll talk about it. Now, that was the first thing, seeing things holistically in totality. That was the first thing. The second thing was that, and this is very difficult for most of us to see, very tough, because unlike most of us, Krishnamurti would say that we are not looking at, not our understanding of thought is not right. So if you look at thought, and we will go into a short passage also, which I will read out. And if we understand what thought is, then you will realize that it's very repetitive, very mechanical. One thing reinforces the other. One problem that you have, a response to that through thought reinforces that problem. So, what he was saying is that it's not that you cannot stop thought, it's not possible to stop thought. But can you understand the nature of thought? What is thought? So, I mean, to put it in a nutshell, and for myself as a layman, actually also, is that there is one faculty or one faculty that is able to use the faculty of thought rightly, because that that particular person has no filters from which he acts. So he can use that facility of thought absolutely with clarity, with no pollution, no distortion. So you see exactly this thing as it is. तो वही देखते हैं जो है. Whereas if that is not understood, one sees in a distorted manner. And that's what we see happening in the world. Because when you have division, is the first thing that we mentioned is there is the division caused by all that fragmentation arising from the fact that we don't see ourselves as human beings first and last. Everything else is, So if I'm a scientist, whatever I do, I will do it with great, but I will make sure that as a human being, my scientific skill will never be used for evil, for destruction. That's very vital, actually. Similarly, if we don't understand the role of thought, and how it has actually created the persona that I am, the me, if we don't understand that, then it's a big problem, because then one is not able to understand what he comes later, and when it comes to the issue of something that is beyond thought, that we will also discuss later. But for the moment, I thought that I could read out something, very brief passage, which will perhaps bring out this issue of thought. So I'll read, there are two passages ahead, but I'll read, and later on we'll share it also, by this thing. This was in a talk in 1977. Krishnamurti was saying, a human being throughout life depends on thought. And the things that thought has put together as the most essential, holiness, unholiness, morality, immorality, and so on. Someone comes along and says, now look, all that is the movement of the past. Having reasoned with him logically, the other says, why not? What is wrong with holding on to thought, even though it is of the past? This is a dialogue going on. He acknowledges it and says, I'll hold to it. What is wrong? Yet when the human mind lives in the past, and when it holds to the past, then it is incapable of living or perceiving truth. But everything is full of his own creations, his own nonsense. You can call it nonsense also, because it has never been questioned. So then he goes on. We come to a certain point and we say, yes, I see, and I recognize logically that in those things there is no security. And when they are questioned, there is fear. And when we say we see that, what do we mean by that word see? The see meaning that I understand what he is saying. Do we see it? Or is it intellectual understanding? Seeing is a very different thing. Is it merely a logical understanding, a verbal understanding, a linear understanding, or is it an understanding which is so profound that that very understanding breaks down without any effort the whole movement? So this is very critical, and when we discuss this issue will come up. How the understanding, you cannot do much about the movement of thought. As long as there is content, it will keep on happening. You get up sometimes and you see somebody whom you don't like. You have forgotten that person. Suddenly, when the person comes, all your memories come. A লোকটা আমাকে এমন করেছিল, this, that, all these sort of things. So everything that's so until the issue of understanding thought, understanding how content actually dictates us, puts us in prison. So that's the issue there actually. So seeing the truth of it is intelligence. And this we will come to that later. Seeing the truth of it is intelligence. And we will try later to perhaps put it in a more simple form that is there a seeing which is not from that vicious circle of thought? যে আমিটা যেটা ক্রিয়েট করেছি, what I have created myself, I am actually seeing everything through that. My own preferences, my own, I am so and so, I am that, and this person is so and so. I am seeing everything through that. So, what does he mean when he says the seeing the truth of that, understanding thought, that is the beginning of intelligence? That we will have a chance to discuss again. Such intelligence is not reason, logic, or the very careful dialectical explanation. The latter is merely the exposition of thought in various forms. And thought is never intelligent. Again, going back to what thought is, because it's something to do with whatever one has accumulated. It's the memory bank. So it's coming from there. All of that is, that is what is coming from the past. The perception of the truth is intelligence. And that intelligence, in that intelligence, there is complete security. That intelligence is not yours or mine. That is the biggest difference. There is a seeing in which you are not there at all. It means not that there is this thing, but because the me is subjective, it is carrying hundreds of conclusions of its own. It is always subjective. Therefore, looking at that and seeing that there is the possibility of a seeing which is outside this zone. For the moment, I'm using that word in my own language, but this is what he really refers to, the intelligence. Again, we will have a chance to discuss that. That intelligence is not yours or mine. That intelligence is not conditioned. We are finished with all that. In other words, there is no quality of being this or that in that flow. I am this, my parivar, my so-and-so, my country, my nation, all are gone completely. So that's something very important in his his teachings. Though, as I said, I have just picked out a few, only a few, because time is short, and it's always difficult to go beyond the point in a short discussion. But we have seen that thought in its very movement creates conditioning, and when you understand that movement, that very understanding is intelligence. In that intelligence, there is security. From that, there is action. And we will come later to the third issue when we said from that intelligence there is action. We may talk about this question in different ways in different fields, such as fear, pleasure, sorrow, death, meditation. But the essence of it is this: thought is the movement from the past, therefore of time and therefore measurable. That which is measurable can never find the immeasurable, which is truth. That can only take place when the mind actually sees the truth that whatever thought has created, in that there is no security. The very observation of that is intelligence. That breakthrough, if it comes and when it comes, that is the real breakthrough, because that is the birth of something which is very unique. He uses the word intelligence, which is very, very unique, because in that there is no property of the me in that. Amar aghat, my hurt, इसमें दुख हुआ, वो मेरा बेटा हमारा ये, no, my nation has been affected, they are attacking my nation, वो सब मैं मेरा सब चले गया complete. So when there is that intelligence, then it is all finished. It finished when actually there is like breaking away from prison. Prison is actually being in the field of conditioning. Conditioning, again, is referring to everything that we have built up ourselves. That's the prison. That's the prison. Then you are out of this world, though you are living in it. Though trying to do something in it, you are completely an outsider. So there is that unique quality of complete objectivity, which is very important even in scientific inquiry. Complete objectivity, where there is not the element of bias and prejudice at all. কোনো scope ही नहीं. There's no scope of it at all. So that's the second thing. Again, too short to discuss the second pillar. One is the holistic seeing, looking at yourself as what you are, not all the additions. Hindu, Christian, Muslim, all that sort of thing, just as you are, as a human being. Second one, as we said, is really understanding the nature of thought. Not to say that thought is a faculty everybody needs, because thought is, you need that knowledge, as he would often say, to go from here to there, to do your work, etc. All that is there. But he's talking in terms of psychological knowledge, which is something that, things that come up with ambition, with competition, with greed, violence, all that is talking about that sphere. So that's the second thing. Now, the third thing is, it comes actually flows from this, because we often talk about freedom, and in scientific inquiry, as in spiritual inquiry or religious inquiry, freedom is necessary, because freedom is what? Freedom is you are absolutely free from every bondage that you hold about yourself, about your own sort of amar ki hobe, nothing of that is there. So that's can only happen when you said we are talking about understanding the role of thought and all that. More important is that when there is freedom, we often think that freedom hole we have choice. মানে এটা করবো না ওইটা করবো. On the contrary, Krishnamurti says that when there is complete freedom, freedom meaning not freedom in the sense that somebody is putting some authority, or not in that sense, but you are free completely, then there is no choice. Rasta, if I see somebody lying on the road, I will not say, but hamara kya hai? Somebody will do something about him. Probably. Maybe another person, who's actually tied down with all sorts of things, will say, oh, it's not my business. Kaun padega? Who will get into this mess? Another person who has only one response, there's no choice. That means I have to do something about it. Being a human being, there is something that I have to do. So the understanding the true meaning of freedom, that's also very, very important. It's very different from what we actually understand freedom to be. So again, I'll just read a very short excerpt which I've gathered. Here. So when we talk of freedom, we are talking of the fundamental issue. It is not a freedom from something, not freedom from something, but the quality of a mind and heart that are free and with which direction does not exist. So it's very important to understand what does it mean direction does not exist. There is not a predetermined thing which says I must do only this. It means that it's going as per your preferences, bias, or whatever. Freedom from something is only a modified continuity of what has been. And therefore, it is not freedom. When there is direction and therefore choice, freedom cannot exist. For direction is division, and hence choice and conflict. We were discussing this example. If there is a complete clarity arising from the fact that there is no other content that is determining your response as a human being, that বাড়িতে পৌঁছবে গালাগাল দেবে, or they will curse me, तुम क्यों इसमें पड़ गया, why did you go into that chamela? Nothing of that sort. Only one thing, somebody is almost dead, I have to take to the hospital. Nothing else comes. So that's on the contrary, therefore he says that on freedom there is no choice, it's choiceless. There is no such thing as individual freedom, but only freedom. The word individual in its very meaning implies indivisible, not an entity opposed to the collective. But we have made a concept of individuality with its peculiar characteristics, tendencies, and so on, which are the response of conditioning. And we oppose it to the collective. This conditioning is part of the culture, economic, social, and so on, in which the mind has been educated. So here comes the role of education in all our present day education. You can imagine the state of the child who is subject to education as of today. Whereas, the whole potential of possibly of a new mind, which is possible if the right education is there, the right environment, etc. But year after year, day after day, what we churn out is just a continuation of what is, in terms of whatever is going on, just a continuation. This is what they pick up from there, from at home, from the environment, this is what they pick up. So there's an indication there. The responsibility of a conditioned mind is irresponsibility, which can be perceived in the present cultures of society. This irresponsibility is shown in education, social injustice, national divisions, different ideologies, leading to competition, wars, starvation, affluence, and poverty. The irresponsibility of organized religions is shown in their support and maintenance of these cultures. These religions preach morality but sustain corruption. They are at war with each other. I'll just move further. Responsibility has quite a different meaning when there is freedom. Responsibility does not deny freedom, they go together. When there is the deep fundamental reality of freedom, responsibility is concerned with the whole of life and not with a fragment of life. So this again is a very different understanding of responsibility. Very different understanding. I may just briefly intervene with something else. I was watching a very nice short video of Sonam Wangchuk when he was a child, I think, when he was a younger person. He was talking about what happens in Ladakh. He says the big difference between what happens in Ladakh is that there is a big difference between being educated and being wise. And he said in Ladakh, actually, they have learned to teach their children to have the skill, but to have wisdom, so that you look at everything from its overall impact on humanity, on society. That's very relevant. That's what he means by responsible, because you are free, you will never be able to give anything other than a complete response. It will never be a half-hearted response. All these things are part of it. But when they stem from self-interest, then obviously it will put spokes in the wheel everywhere. So that's the important thing.
In a previous session, we were talking about artificial intelligence and human-led AI. So, thinking about the word intelligence, we can say artificial intelligence, but we cannot say artificial wisdom.
Yes, true.
It can only be human.
True, yes. So he says it is concerned with the whole activity of the mind and heart, and not with one particular activity. Freedom is the total harmony in which responsibility is natural. It comes naturally, but nobody has to say, "Tumhe ye daitto ta na ho." That response is not induced or imposed. It is the natural outcome of freedom. Without responsibility, there is no freedom. So I was just touching on this very briefly. As I said, I was just looking for a few pillars to start with, and this was one of them. Freedom was one of them, where some of these things that will be an outcome of this is the observation. Very often, Krishnamurti talks about observation. In our case, when we always looking at observation in a slightly subjective manner. So very often the observer or the me is involved in the observation. So my biases, my self-interests are all involved in the observation. Whereas he says that if you really can observe from a vantage point where there is only pure observation, then you don't even need to do anything. That seeing will act. ওই দেখাটাই কাজ করবে, তুমি কোনো কাজ করতে গেলে সেটা কাজ হবে না actually. I mean, we try to act on something, on my ego and my this thing, that doesn't work. But if you are able to just see totally objectively, then that seeing acts. So that will also come as a part of this. And we discussed about holistic seeing. So you don't see things partly. You don't see as, this is my country and my religion, my this and my that. The my goes out of the window completely. In fact, that, to my mind, though I have not put it down immediately because it's a very fundamental thing, but difficult to follow, is that in Krishnamurti's teaching, and of course all other teachings are the same thing, is that if you don't understand the me for what it is amittota, এটা যদি না বোঝা যায়, we try to perpetuate it. So, yeah, so we try to, perpetuate, continue করতে। And we are always living in a situation where we want uh, our continuity, knowing that there is nothing like that. So when a seer says that you look at the content, how that me has been created, how that has actually come about, then you will realize that is we are talking about cessation of the self. ওই সেলফটাকে ডিসলভ হয়ে যাওয়ার কথাটা বলছি, for freedom. So I mean that is also a very fundamental thing. I did not pick it up as a separate thing because it's a bit difficult to grasp initially. But ultimately, it comes to a point where you are saying that you really question what is this me that I keep on trying to protect, and sort of what is it? So that question he keeps asking, and in fact says that ultimately, as long as the me exists in different forms, the suffering is bound to be there. That's the main thing there. And going on, one of the things that we touched briefly, again, we talked about intelligence. And intelligence in the context of what Krishnamurti says, it's something that you can never describe in words. And, for example, it's very difficult to describe that state in which we have seen the truth of thought and the truth of all this. As a result of that, what takes place is very difficult to describe. That freedom, again, we come back to that word freedom. It's very difficult to describe what takes place. So he uses that word intelligence. It's not something to do with the mind, not something to do with the intellect, not something to do with thought. It is to do with something totally different. And maybe it's something that also sees the role of thought, the place of thought, puts it in its right place also. After understanding the role of thought, automatically then it is able to put it in the right place. So those are the four things that I had in mind to share. But there is so much more, but given the time constraints, and I thought we should also interact a little bit.
Sorry about the
Like, no problem.
live stream.
No problem. So I was just saying, I just said that I was trying to pick up the four pillars, which I thought, just four pillars, there are many more, because the beauty about any teaching, real teaching, is that they're all interconnected. They're all interconnected. Even a beautiful paragraph you read in some book, that one paragraph can take you directly to where you want to go. It's all interlinked. So, but out of that, just for the sake of the fact that we have to have some sort of a structure, and so I just thought, thinking of these four things, which is the holistic looking, with the ground that is completely total. You look at yourself only as a human being, no fragmentation, no division. So what that results in, sometimes we have a conjecture, how does it help? But the issue is, that's the thing to avoid, is to first understand that without that, the ground is not right. And then the second thing we talked about thought is that not to deny the fact that thought has its place, but to realize that the way it exists in the psychological framework, it is responsible for all the horrors in this world. So that's the second thing. Much more to discuss that. Third is, as a result of understanding of that, when you have the freedom, when the freedom is there, so that is not freedom from something, it's a state in which you are able to see things exactly as it is. তারপরে তো কোনো choice নেই, no biases, no prejudice. You have nothing more to see, and you act accordingly. And finally, we came to the point that is very difficult to describe. And Krishnamurti often in his talks, he will often come to this at the end, what he calls the immeasurable. So this is something that he would come right at the end, something that is immeasurable. So that is something which is, you can call it intelligence, you can call it the sacred. But the issue there is that all the things that have put us in prison, if we don't understand those and therefore lead to their dissolution. So till that time, till this takes birth, the intelligence takes birth, or Once it, only then is there the true freedom. So these are the four things I wanted to mention. And we'll have the time later also, but I thought whenever you have time, do come to our center in Jatin Das Road, very far away from here. It's in South Kolkata, near Deshpriya Park. And once we have email, we'll connect also on email and all. So now I think, we can possibly, open up to discussion, interaction. And also, I think one of the things that I deliberately try to avoid is to see a link between this and, the theme that we have, this Abhimanyu has put together is DeSci. Right. Yeah. Because, then you automatically come to, if you put that first, you start making conclusions about what is right and what is wrong. So, I mean, for example, we start with the conclusion that this is right, that is not right. It's much better rather to have a complete understanding. And if it's holistic, then that will give perhaps the right place to every sort of framework which has a utility of its own. So it's not that, you would look at it differently, totally differently. So maybe at times, the movement is led by a certain interest in something. But when you see it in totality, everything in totality, maybe the seeing will result in something that is very holistic. And therefore, it is able to have a place for everything as long as it's not harmful. So that's why I did not bring in that, and partly also by lack of knowledge of the subject of DeSci, being a very admin sort of person, So that was that. I just want to open it up for thoughts, any suggestions, comments.
So I think what I can connect is like I read something about this Vipassana. Many are going into those Vipassana training centers. So, but what they're saying, try not to do anything deliberately. Like the very basic thing is very simple. Like just sit and focus on your breath. Like it's like doing nothing. Actually, it's the most difficult thing to do. Not to do anything. And so what happens is I went there for a few hours. So what I found it very magical. It's nothing very philosophical, nothing big jargons, no big. Just sit. I'm just focusing on my breath. So what I found after a few minutes, those thoughts and those chatterings they're slowing down. They're just slowing down, and there's this calmness and this that clarity, and that clarity, this calmness, that cannot be explained. It's a very internal kind of realization, or that's the thing.
Very true.
It's not the thought; it's actually opposite to thought. Yes. When thoughts are being slowed down, now you have the complete objectiveness. Right. There's the breath. I'm just observing it. That's it. Right. So
very true. Actually, in fact, many people find it difficult to because in Vipassana, one of the most difficult things I've heard, because I have never done myself, according to Vipassana. One of the most difficult things is to be able to watch your inner movements without running away. Very often, inside there is so much noise, so much chaos, so much that we don't want to hear, don't want to see. Whereas, in one way, you can say Vipassana compels you to stay with it. And, and most seers will say that you have to stay with it. Because in the process of actually just observing, watching, that itself is the action, basically.
Very small things, like when you just sit and you're observing, so the many things happen in our body. There's some itching, there's some coldness, there's some sweating, hot, but we don't observe it. We're so much busy with whether Putin is attacking Ukraine, or whether India will throw a nuclear bomb on Pakistan. But something is happening very close to you.
Yes.
So we are not observing.
Having one point over here, I mean, you are talking about the sensations that happens, right? How often do we remember like that we are breathing? I mean, in a day, I don't think like I'm a psychologist, so I'm talking from that background itself. Like in a day, we forget to breathe. I mean, if you consciously see yourself, you are stuck at times. You're like, there's no breathing happening, and then you have to consciously let yourself to breathe.
Yes. Very
So
true.
I feel like what I understood from all of it, it's so connected to as a human being to identify ourselves. Along with that, what I could like gain with that third pillar, freedom. I feel like freedom brings kindness.
Yes.
It's like when we are aware, when we are free of thoughts and free of those boundaries that's restricting us, I feel like that brings kindness to us, that brings empathy through which we can connect with people
True.
in an absolute form.
Yes. Compassion.
Yeah, compassion, absolutely. All that
Talk about compassion.
Compassion. Yes.
it does. And yeah, go on.
No, actually, things are very simple. I mean, it's we that we make these things very complicated with so much philosophy, so much of stuff and knowledge. So once someone is speaking very simple, it feels very confusing. How can just sit and observe? It's so simple. How can it be so simple?
No, in fact, I would like to share one personal experience. You see, when I used to be working in my old job, in British Council when I was there for a long time, and I used to go to Bombay, and my sister, and her family, they used to watch a lot of these videos, Krishnamurti videos. And so when I used to watch, they used to be watching in the drawing room, and I was watching, I would say, I will not listen to this man because he's saying, God is your creation. Suppose, basically, he said, once, God is your creation. So I said, I don't want to listen. He's an atheist. Now, for some time it was going on, so I was busy in my work and my, sort of this thing. Now, as I, sort of retired from there basically, and then as the space opened out, and then when you start looking at the same thing, then the realization came that what he is talking about is the fact that you never questioned what you are believing. So what is God for you? What is God? Is it it's a theoretical understanding? Is it anything beyond that? So I mean, so he would actually say to try to actually come to a point where the religious journey is a real journey, not a fake one. Going to the temple, doing this, and then having the illusion that all my this thing is done, but rather to question whether through the points that we discussed, whether there is something very often referred to as the sacred or intelligence or whatever, something that is so pure. And in traditional our Hindu mythology, they would use the word Satchidanand. You see, whereas so it's something that we never look at it that way because we are always looking at me and the God, because we want to create that duality. We don't question the fact that the me itself is an illusion. So that lies the fundamental flaw. The fundamental flaw.
That's great. Like very small and simple things. It's like when we eat, like, are we attentive what we are eating? Like what they say that you shouldn't speak and calmly. We are in our thought and just eating. So if you can do that when you're eating, with full attention, I am savoring the whole thing. So there's no need of thought, no need of that explanation. So I think this is this master chef doing. No need, just like I once read Krishnamurti's one, like I was in school at that time, but still it stuck with me, and I found it so profound. Like, you are observing a beautiful flower, right? And what an intellectual mind can do, he can go into it. Okay, so this is a yellow color flower. So the light rays are coming to my eyes, and the brain is interpreting it. So this is a photon, there's an electron, there's a this, and there's a that. So instead of doing that, I'm just saying it, and I'm just observing, and I'm completely with that beauty. The most simplest thing. So I found that very profound. So no need to go that deep. And again, the thought is in process.
Yes.
A thought is, okay, so this is a flower, so I will use this flower for this, that, this. So who created that flower? So whether God has created the flower, the scientists will say, no, you are a fool. God hasn't created. So this is Darwin's mechanism. Why need that? Just observe it. That was my understanding. So actually, it's very simple. We are complicating it with our so-called intellectual.
Like this, we are doing this.
That's true. I can.
I feel like there's a issue of conditioning as well. I
Yes,
guess.
yes.
Because often we want to think different, or maybe we are trying to see the world from an outer perspective, but the conditioning that has happened till date and the societal pressure that's there.
Yes,
I mean, you have to do things,
Yes,
and that is how you're not liberating yourself from making choices.
correct.
I mean, the example that you gave in, like there is someone lying on the ground, and you need to help them. Now, obviously, most of us, I'm saying there is an inner kindness that's always there inside us. But the question that arises is like, should I?
Should I? Yes.
Why? And that is not because I feel like should I help or not, but mostly it is because what people do.
Society. That's right.
And what what conditioning I have had. Like, if someone is there, if you might help, there might be something, and those questions and those thoughts are something that limits.
Absolutely right. Yes.
And I think there's one more fundamental thing with our this biology or with our evolution. Is the sense of fear. Because there's always a fear involved in every action we do. Like somebody is lying. If I do, may I be involved in a police or kind of a murky situation? And there's always a fear in every action.
Fear in very simple things. I would share my own example. So today I saw this online. So I had a random thing that I want to come and visit.
Oh, you saw.
Yes. So I had a I want to come and visit it because I was just inclined to the idea. Now when I was coming in the lift and I was like, I'm alone.
Yes.
I am just one person. And what if there is a point if you do not vibe with people, or how would you make comfortable around people?
Yes.
And that fear it is very simple, it is very lenient, but it triggers your thoughts so deep that you're constantly worrying about it.
True, very true. Yes. Also, there is also sometimes, like Krishnamurti would often say that sometimes if you notice, we have this, we have a lot of interactions in our center. Every now and then we have interactions. So it takes a lot of time because, people come with the notion, what if I say something? And if that somebody says he's stupid, he doesn't know what he's saying, they're scared to say. Whereas if there is a complete openness, and like suppose you are discussing something, and my interest in it is as deep as yours, then what happens? There is a very great intensity in the discussion, in which all the barriers break down completely. So there is no question of knowing, not knowing, and all these sort of things completely break down. So they are absolutely right. I think that fear does have a lot of.
It impacts.
Yes.
And the fear of judgment.
Judgment, yes.
Like as you mentioned, as of now.
Yes.
I mean, what people would think if I want to say something. I have a lot. I guess like we all, whenever we are listening to something, we all have a lot of thoughts inside us, but we do not actually let it out. And that the main reason is if I say something stupid or if I don't make any sense, instead of let's just go out and try. So
Yes,
that
very
safe
true, very
space,
true.
finding that space is also important.
True, very true.
Right. So, again, a very nice point which just stuck with me. I was in a Zoom interaction with someone.
Uh-huh.
So,
Yeah.
like, yeah. Uh, he just randomly spoke a line that no need to burden yourself with so much things and no need to think that you are the center of the universe. You are not. You're just a speck of dust in this hole. So don't burden yourself with
Right.
the whole world is watching you. Nobody is watching you. It's the it's again
True. Yes.
it's I who is thinking
Yes.
that the whole world is watching me and judging me. Nobody has time.
Live stream also like
Yeah, with your point, I was reading somewhere like there was a particular meeting going on, and a person who had diabetes. So it was very important for that person to have food at that particular time. And that particular person saw the time, and it was the time that he had to have food. The meeting was going on. He just went up, he took his tiffin out, and he started eating in the middle of the meeting, and no one noticed. Everyone was cool with it. And it's like we often don't feel like if let's say I have to drink water, so I won't pick it out because I would feel like it's awkward. But no one will actually bother a lot. It's just that thoughts.
just me bothering me.
Yes, thoughts. So that's how the
Yes.
example
True,
came.
true. Everything's created. Imagination creates thought, create also. Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
So I think we have around 8 minutes to go. So
Yeah.
I have an email from.
Yeah, maybe I'll introduce his Probir Banerjee.
please.
In fact, I got a hard copy. I got a,
Oh, you got a
I got a hard
yeah,
copy.
sure.
So if you read this one,
Yeah,
have a look.
I
It
have
starts
it
with
with
this. Yeah, you can read from more easy if you like.
Okay.
So what happened is, there are even more contributions that I wanted because there are colleagues in our foundation, some of whom have actually been with Krishnamurti. So, for example, there's a gentleman called Professor Krishna who is in Varanasi. So I wrote to him and I said that that we will be discussing this. Could you also share something? And there is one gentleman called Shailesh Sirali who is actually in Pune. Now he's a very well-known mathematician and also he's very well connected. He was in touch with Krishnamurti also. So he used to work in Rishi Valley as for a long time. Yeah, that's good. Him and also one or two others, and they sent their responses. But my colleague now, Probir Banerjee, with whom now everybody will read out.
Yeah.
Probir Da is actually somebody who has done the translation of all our books from English to Bangla.
Yeah, in Bengal.
So and later on, we'll all be in touch with email. I'll get details from everybody. Then maybe you'll be able to. I mean, this is something a passion with him, and he with another person has also been doing a lot of dubbing of videos in Bangla. So now there are quite a few videos available in Bengali. Krishnamurti short talks, available in Bengali. So when I requested him also, he also said an input. Abhimanyu really liked it, and he told Probir that was very good. So he would like to read
It
it.
actually got tears out of my eyes.
Yeah,
yesterday.
he told me that. He told me that.
So me as a we like to call ourselves D-scientists or D-researchers, you can say. So actually, when I discovered Krishnamurti, it was in the final stages of my research. My PhD work was already done, and I used to sit in a room because I was idle and my work was finished. So I found a lot of like peace in his talks. Like I used to listen to many of his like perspectives in different areas of life. So I would like to then conclude this session with the Pravir sir's questions and thoughts. So it starts like this. As is known to us, decentralization is the process of distributing functions and power away from a central place or authority. Thus, the purpose of such decentralization is to make various aspects of scientific research and dynamic collaboration more open and community driven with the assistance of certain high level technology and tools. In such a situation of decentralization, transparent funding decisions, also crowdfunding decisions, are made online. It strives to set up an environment where Everybody can share their scientific work and also can access and contribute to the research of other members. So far, so good. One now wonders how exactly such decentralization can help science to elevate to a new level. It has been noted that commercial, corporate, or government sponsored science is commodity driven. In such a case, can we call it true science? As we know, technology and the applications of science, however useful they may be, are not the real purpose of science. Technology is a byproduct of science, not the reason of science. Science is to discover the order in the external order of time, space, energy, and matter. Its real purpose is to discover the laws of nature and unravel the great mystery of the origin and operation of the universe in which we live. Agreeably, science through human thought has made so many beautiful things. It has made great strides in the fields of communication, medicines, engineering, sculpture, poetry, and all that. At the same time, even with the so called progress of civilization, it has wrought havoc in relationship, in fomenting troubles through nationalism, in perpetuating wars, in polluting the atmosphere, in draining out the natural resources, in exploiting nations politically and economically, etc. Is decentralized science concerned with profits and patent rights? Is there any possibility of decentralized science centers becoming themselves new power centers? Will decentralized science keep an eye on these grave human issues? Will it somehow help us to understand ourselves and thus be a good human being? Decentralization of science wistfully looks forward to voluntary cooperation of all concerned. Will such decentralization really promote cooperation without understanding the disorder in human consciousness like anger, personal ambition, competition, fear, identification, jealousy, violence, and all that? Jiddu Krishnamurti had used the word inquire. This is not analysis, not debate. An element of wonder is involved here. Childlike curiosity, innocence is able to see through the prejudgments, the dogma, the money that can be made, etc. Innocence of what? Ego, culture, nationalism, power, control, personal success, and more. Being innocent doesn't imply naive, not being informed. It means not having one's perceptions corrupted by personal bias. Are the scientists friends of decentralized science somehow free of these prejudices? Will they feel the need to rationally inquire into the operations of their respective psyche, which is full of conflicts and is fragmented? They are supposed to have a rational approach in conducting research into the movement in the arena of nature and cosmos. Will they be rational in understanding the operations of their mind? Finally, since long, there is a tendency of human beings to assign absolute importance to thought, which has played a dual role. With the help of technology, it has helped the world to improve materially. At the same time, in the psychological domain, the thought has created disaster. Can thought be assigned its right place? Is thought really intelligent? Is thought limited? If yes, how? Will the seminar discuss the above issues? So, these are the questions we can ponder about as we uh, conclude this session.
So later on,
Yeah.
even later on, we can actually
Yeah,
share,
yeah,
contact
yeah,
details,
definitely.
etc.